Welcome back to Learn CSS on Codecademy. We're going to go ahead and go through a few of these lessons. First one is Inline Styles. It says, although CSS is a different language than HTML, it's possible to write CSS code directly within HTML code using inline styles. To style an HTML element, you can add the style attribute directly to the opening tag. After you add the attribute, you can set it equal to the CSS styles you'd like applied to that element. So we have here a paragraph tag, which we give a style of color red, so that would turn this text the color red. This is an inline style. We are putting it directly in line with the paragraph tag. The code in the example above demonstrates how to use inline styling. The paragraph element has a style attribute within its opening tag. Next, the style attribute is set equal to color red, which will set the color of the paragraph text to red within the browser. You might be wondering about the syntax of the following snippet of code, color red. At the moment, the details of the syntax are not important. You'll learn more about CSS syntax in other exercises. For now, it's important to know that inline styles are a quick way of directly styling an HTML element. If you'd like to add more than one style with inline styles, simply keep adding to the style attribute. Make sure to end the styles with a semicolon. So here we have style, color red, semicolon, and then we have another style, font size, 20 pixels, semicolon. In index.html, use inline styles to set the font family of the first paragraph to Arial. So here's index.html. We want to set the font family of the first paragraph. So I'm looking for the first paragraph, which is here, line 14. We're going to set an inline style. So style, and we're going to do font family, colon, Arial, semicolon. So if we run this should set the font family of this first paragraph here, Arial. Let us run this. We did pass, and as you can see, the paragraph text did change. Let us go to the next one. So the style tag. Inline styles are a fast way of styling HTML, but they also have limitations. If you wanted to style, for example, multiple H1 elements, you would have to add inline styling to each element manually. In addition, you would also have to maintain the HTML code when additional H1 elements are added. Fortunately, HTML allows you to write CSS code in its own dedicated section with the style element. CSS can be written between opening and closing style tags. To use the style element, it must be placed inside of the head element. So here is the head, and our styles would go in here in the style tag. After adding a style tag in the head section, you can begin writing CSS code. So we have a paragraph, and then we have this code for all paragraphs. The CSS code in the example above changes the color of all paragraph text to red and also changes the size of the text to 20 pixels. Note how the syntax of the CSS code matches, for the most part, the syntax you used for inline styling. The main difference is that you can specify which elements to apply the styling to. Again, the details of the CSS syntax in the example above aren't important at the moment. You will learn more about the details of CSS syntax in later lessons. Instructions. First, add a style element in the head of index.html. So this is again index.html. Here's our head. You could put it either above or below since it didn't specify. We're going to add our style tag and then closing style. And then our styles would go in here. But let's click run. Nothing should happen since we didn't specify anything until here. Add the inline styles that you removed from the P element to the style element in the head. So here we're going to just copy that there, paste it in here. So we added that there, and we want P elements. Let's go ahead and run this, and nothing changed. Except now, instead of only targeting one paragraph, the first one, anytime that we create another paragraph, it should also change the font family. So let's go ahead and go next. The CSS file. Developers avoid mixing code by storing HTML and CSS code in separate files. HTML files contain only HTML code and CSS files contain only CSS code. You can create a CSS file by using the .css file name extension like so, style.css. As you guys can see, they did create two files. This is index.html and this is style.css. So you create another file that will contain our styles. With a CSS file, you can write all the CSS code needed to style a page without sacrificing the readability and maintainability of your HTML file. Take a look at index.html. Cut the CSS code in between the opening and closing style. So we want this here. And paste it directly in the new file called style. Here, we paste it there. So we also want to delete this style element. Now we can run this. So now we've separated our CSS into its own file. So we click next. Linking the CSS file. So right now, I'm not sure if anybody noticed, but we no longer have our styles. And this is because we are not linking to that file. It says perfect. We've successfully separated structure, HTML, from styling, CSS, but the web page still looks bland. Why? When HTML and CSS code are in separate files, the files must be linked. Otherwise, the HTML file won't be able to locate the CSS code and the styling will not be applied. You can use the link element to link HTML and CSS files together. The link element must be placed within the head of the HTML file. It's a self-closing tag and requires the following three attributes: href, type, and rel. Href, like the anchor element, the value of this attribute must be the address or path to the CSS file. Type, this attribute describes the type of document that you're linking to, in this case a CSS file. The value of its attribute should be set to text/CSS. Rel, this attribute describes the relationship between the HTML file and the CSS file. Because you are linking to a style sheet, the value should be set to style sheet. When linking an HTML file and CSS file together, the link element will look like the following. And this is what that link would look like. Note that in the example above, the path to the style sheet is a URL. As you guys can see here, it's a URL. When you're doing it locally, it probably will point to some file on your computer. So specifying the path to the style sheet using a URL is one way of linking to a style sheet. If the CSS file is stored in the same directory as your HTML file, then you can specify a relative path instead of a URL like so. So here we are linking to the same directory, and in that same directory is our HTML file. We're pointing to our style. So using a relative path is a very common way of linking a style sheet. Let's link the style sheet, style.css, to the HTML file, index.html. First, add a link element within the head section. So here we want to add a link, and those are self-closing, as you can see. So let's run that. Nothing has happened since we have not included this. Next, add the href attribute to the link element and set it equal to style.css. So back in the link, we want to do an href, set it equal to style.css. Take a look at the web page in the browser to the right. Do you notice any changes? Let's check this part out. It says add the type attribute and set it to the correct value. And like I said here, type text/CSS. So we go, we paste that there. Might as well do rel style sheet. Let's run that. So both are now added, and now as you guys can see it finally changed. So once you are able to link to your style sheet out here, then it's a lot easier to target different things inside of, like if you want to grab this H1, we can do H1 and add like a background color and set it equal to red. Now the H1, any H1 on the page should have a background of red. If we were to copy this and do the H2s and do maybe a blue, we could run this, and this is a lot nicer because we get to separate our CSS into its own file and clean up our code. We'll go ahead and stop there since we haven't actually gone to the syntax yet. What I would say is just practice linking to an external style sheet. On your own personal computer, create a folder, create an index.html, create a style.css. Within that folder, you'll have those two files, and just link to that CSS in the index.html file the way that we did here, and just practice that, and we'll come back and continue on the next video. I'll see you guys then.